Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we really get into the details of important source material. We're continuing our look at the MPEP, the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure.
That's right. We're going section by section, aiming to make this, well, let's face it, pretty dense legal resource a bit more accessible. It's all about breaking it down.
And today we're in MPEP Chapter 1800, which is all about the Patent Cooperation Treaty, the PCT. Specifically, we're honing in on Section 1875.
MPP Section 1875, titled Unity of Invention before the International Preliminary Examining Authority.
So the goal today is to understand this specific procedure, how unity of invention is handled during that international preliminary examination phase.
Exactly. It's a really key part of the PCT process, and understanding it is, well, crucial if you're an applicant using the system.
Okay, let's start with the basics then. Unity of invention. What exactly does that mean in this PCT context, especially when you're at the preliminary examination stage?
Sure. So, at its heart, unity of invention means all the claims in your international application need to relate back to a single general inventive concept. You can't just bundle, say, 3 completely unrelated ideas into one application.
It's about focus.
It is. It stems from the PCT itself, Article 34, and you see it reflected in U.S. rules too, like 37 CFR 1.488. The idea is really about efficiency, making sure the search and examination process can focus on one core invention per application.
Right. Stops people from trying to get, multiple separate patents examined for the price of one application fee, essentially.
Pretty much. And the body that checks this during the preliminary examination phase is the International Preliminary Examining Authority, or IPEA.
The IPEA. Okay, so they get the application, maybe after the initial search has been done, and they look at the claims. What if they decide, hang on, these claims seem to cover different inventions?
Well, if the IPEA examiner finds what they believe is a lack of unity, they have a couple of main paths. First, they might just issue a written opinion.
Like a heads up.
Sort of, yeah. Pointing out the lack of unity and explaining why they think so. But often they'll move to the second option, which is more formal. They issue an invitation for the applicant to take specific action.
An invitation. Sounds polite, but I'm guessing it's more of a requirement.
You could say that. It's issued using a specific form, Form PCT IPEA 405. This isn't just a suggestion. It clearly states the examiner's reasoning for finding a lack of unity.
What does the form actually tell the applicant?
It gets specific. It identifies the different groups of claims the examiner sees as separate inventions. And crucially, it tells the applicant how many additional examination fees are needed if they want all those identified inventions examined by the IPEA.
Ah, so it links the problem to a potential cost. Okay. The applicant gets this Form 405. What are their choices then?
They basically have 3 main routes, and which one you choose is a strategic decision. First, you can restrict the claims, meaning you choose one of the identified inventions, usually the one the IPEA points to as the main invention, and agree to have only those claims examined in the preliminary phase. You essentially park the other claimed inventions for this stage.
Okay, option 1, narrow the focus. What's option 2?
Option 2 is simple. You pay the additional fees. If the IPEA says there are 2 extra inventions, you pay 2 extra fees. This tells the IPEA, okay, examine everything you identified.
Straightforward enough. But what if you, the applicant, think the examiner is wrong? What if you're sure all your claims do relate to a single inventive concept?
That brings us to option 3, which is really important. You can pay the additional fees, but pay them under protest.
Under protest. How does that work?
It means you pay the money so the examination of all claims can proceed, but you simultaneously file a formal statement arguing why you believe the finding of lack of unity is incorrect. You make your case.
And is there any point to that besides just disagreeing?
Oh, absolutely. If your protest is found to be justified, maybe by the IPEA itself upon review, or sometimes later during the national phase entry, you might get those additional fees refunded. So it preserves your rights while keeping the examination going.
That's a useful mechanism. Okay, so restrict, pay, or pay under protest. What happens if the applicant just ignores the invitation, doesn't respond, doesn't pay?
Well, inaction has clear consequences. If you don't restrict or pay the fees within the set time limit, the IPEA will proceed with the preliminary examination, but only on the claims relating to what it identified as the main invention.
Everything else just gets left out of the preliminary examination report.
Exactly. Those claims related to the other perceived inventions won't be examined at this international stage.
And how does the IPA decide which one is the main invention? Is it just arbitrary?
No, there's a basis for it. Generally, it's linked back to the initial search. The main invention is usually the one that the International Searching Authority, the ISA, first searched or considered the principal invention. Often, it's simply the invention that appears first in the claims.
Got it. Let's try to make this more concrete. The MPP often uses examples. How about one involving, say, a product, a way to make it, and a machine to make it?
Yeah, that's a classic example and really helpful. So imagine your application claims. 1, a new chemical compound, the product. 2, a method of synthesizing that specific compound. And 3, a specialized reactor designed for carrying out that synthesis.
Okay, product, method, apparatus. How would the IPEA likely view the unity there?
They'd look at the links. Very often, the product claim, the compound, and the specific method claim, how to make that compound, are seen as being closely tied together. They share that single general inventive concept.
So product and method might be okay as one invention.
Quite possibly, yes, because the method directly produces the claimed product, but the apparatus, the reactor in this case, that might be seen differently.
Why? It's used in the method.
True, but the reactor itself could have inventive features that are independent of the specific compound being made. Maybe the reactor design could be used for other processes too. The IPEA might conclude that the apparatus represents a separate inventive concept, not intrinsically linked only to the claimed product and its specific method.
I see. So in that scenario, the IPA might say, product and method are invention 1. The apparatus is invention 2. Pay an extra fee if you want the apparatus claims examined.
That's a very common outcome. It shows that just being related isn't always enough for PCT unity. There needs to be that single general inventive concept underlying everything.
This really underscores how important claim drafting is, thinking about unity right from the start.
Absolutely. Okay, what else procedurally should people know about this?
Right, the practicalities. What about deadlines for responding to that invitation, the Form 405?
This is critical. The time limit given in the invitation is not extendable. Usually, it's 1 month from when the invitation was mailed.
1 month non-extendable. Wow, that's tight. You really have to be on the ball?
You do. Miss that deadline, and as we said, examination gets limited to the main invention by default. There's generally no fixing it later at the IPEA stage.
Any flexibility in how you respond? Can you, call them?
The MPP mentions that sometimes, particularly for electing to restrict or authorizing fee payments, things might be handled by phone. But there are conditions, like having a pre-authorized deposit account. They can charge fees to, say, a USPTO deposit account if the USPTO is acting as the IPA. It's not the standard route for everything.
Okay. Is there anything the IPA absolutely won't examine no matter what you do or pay?
Yes, and this is a major point. The IPEA will not conduct a preliminary examination on any claimed invention that wasn't searched by the International Searching Authority.
So if the ISA found lack of unity earlier during the search phase, and you didn't pay extra search fees then for certain claims,
then the IPEA generally won't examine those unsearched claims now, even if you offer to pay examination fees. The preliminary examination builds upon the foundation laid by the international search.
that makes sense. It connects the two phases. What if the opposite happens? What if the ISA didn't find any unity problems, but then the IPEA examiner looks at it and does find a lack of unity?
That can definitely happen. The IPA performs its own independent assessment of unity for examination purposes. They aren't bound by what the ISA did or didn't find. So yes, an IPA examiner can raise a new lack of unity objection, even if it wasn't mentioned in the search report.
So you might get through the search okay, but still face a unity challenge later. Good to know. Is there ever a time when an examiner might see a potential lack of unity, but sort of let it slide?
There's a provision for that, actually.
Here.
PCT Rule 68.1 gives the examiner some discretion. If they determine that examining the whole application, even with the perceived separate inventions, would involve minimal extra work and be more efficient overall.
More efficient than issuing the invitation and dealing with responses and fees.
Exactly. If it's just not worth the administrative hassle for a very minor split, the examiner can choose to examine the entire application without requiring restriction or extra fees. They'd usually note this decision, citing efficiency, but it's purely discretionary, not something an applicant can demand.
Right. It's their call based on the workload. Okay, let's pull this together. For someone listening, maybe an inventor or a patent agent trying to navigate the PCT using the MPP, why is really understanding Section 1875 so important?
Because it outlines a really critical juncture in the international phase. It dictates the scope of what gets examined in the IPEA. Knowing this section means you understand how unity is judged, what triggers that formal invitation process, what your options are, restrict pay, protest, and importantly, the consequences of not acting.
And the deadlines, the link to the earlier search.
Yes, all of that. It covers the strict time limits, the fact that unsearched claims won't be examined, the possibility of challenging a finding, and even that small chance of examiner discretion. Having this knowledge helps you anticipate issues, draft claims strategically, budget for potential fees, and respond effectively if a unity objection comes up.
It really does seem fundamental to managing the PCT process properly. It's not just about the invention, but managing these procedural steps laid out in the MPP.
Precisely. The MPP is your roadmap for the procedure, and 1875 is a key intersection on that map.
This has been incredibly helpful, really clarifying that process.
And before we wrap up, we definitely want to give a special thank you to Mike Shepard, the creative director who's been instrumental in putting this whole MPEP audio series together.
Absolutely. And now for our standard disclaimer. Please remember, this summary regarding MPP Section 1875 was generated using AI tools like ChatGPT and NotebookLM based on the source material. While we aim for accuracy, there could be errors or omissions.
Right. This is for general educational and informational purposes only. It's not legal advice, and it's certainly not a substitute for reading the official MPEP itself, getting formal instruction, or consulting with a registered patent practitioner about your specific situation.
Always go to the official sources or a qualified professional for authoritative guidance.
Okay, so we've unpacked MPE Section 1875 Unity of Invention before the IPEA.
The main takeaway seems to be that the IPEA does its own unity check, and you, the applicant, need to be ready to respond decisively if they issue that formal invitation, whether you restrict, pay up, or fight the finding under protest.
Couldn't have said it better. And that leads us to a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on.
Okay, let's hear it.
Considering that the IPEA can raise unity issues even if the ISA didn't, and knowing the costs and hassle involved in dealing with these objections, how should this affect the way you draft your claims in the first place?
The strategy question.
Right. Do you go broad initially, trying to capture several related concepts in one application, knowing you might have to pay extra fees or restrict later? Or do you draft very tightly focused claim sets from the get-go to minimize unity risks, perhaps planning to file separate applications for different aspects?
It's that tension between wanting comprehensive protection early versus managing the procedural hurdles and costs of the PCT system.
Exactly. There's no single right answer, but it's a strategic calculation every PCT applicant needs to consider based on their invention, their budget, and their goals. Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought. We hope this deep dive has shed some light on MPP Section 1875. Join us next time as we continue exploring the manual right here on The Deep Dive.